I'm Gilad Barash, and welcome to Who's Your Data, the podcast that deals with how data influences life and how life influences data, the human side of data analytics. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Who's Your Data podcast. Generative AI has become a hot buzzword everywhere, and it's especially true in the enterprise organization space. But how do enterprise organizations use it, and what are the challenges and pitfalls in attempting to implement it? Can it truly be cross-organizational, or is it relegated to specific tasks in specific departments? Not that there's anything wrong with that. To help ponder these questions, I chat with Inna Tokarev Sela, founder and CEO of Illumex, a company that specializes in implementing generative AI solutions in the enterprise. We discuss being in the third wave of generative AI, what it means to have business semantics across the organization, and how to approach utilizing generative AI in the best way. Let's get to the conversation. Right, so Inna, welcome to Who's Your Data podcast.
Hi, Gilad. It's great to be here.
I'm really glad that you are here. Nowadays, with all of the talk on generative AI being a huge buzzword, and especially in the enterprise organization space, I really wanted to talk to somebody to kind of demystify a little bit about that area. So, like I said, thank you for coming on the show. And can you start by telling us a little bit about your background and about Illumex?
Yeah, I started my career in a big enterprise called SAP, Enterprise Software Vendor, and I got very lucky to be part of the cloud journey of the company and then big data journey with SAP HANA, and especially working with customers such as Walmart and Pacific Builder to really help them to onboard the data analytics initiatives. And then with Sisense as VP Artificial Intelligence to really take this forefront of generative AI against working with strategic accounts such as Lockheed Martin and see what generative AI can actually make for those companies and how many benefits you can see. But of course, those journeys were not frictionless. And this is where I saw a big opportunity to create my own company. So I started Illumex to enable customers to make that data decision based on data. Because right now, you wouldn't believe that statistics says only 20% of decision making in enterprise is based on data. That's exactly what we are solving with self-service access to data analytics to any employee in enterprise.
And when you pitch or when you talk about, I want to sort of just set the table. When you talk about generative AI, how do you think of it as being different from traditional AI methods, machine learning, in terms of what it can do for the enterprise? Like what types of questions or problems, challenges can it solve for an enterprise organization?
It's a great question because I do not believe in generative AI replacing humans and functions. I believe generative AI augmenting different functions. And in enterprise, what we see right now is this explosion of data, multimodal data. Structured documents, images, audios, video, what have you. You cannot scale your data teams, right? Your data personnel to manage this data and to build the pipelines and make sense of it with analytics and cater it to decision making with reports. So augmentation of all those roles. So this is where I see generative AI is going to play a significant role in the near future. So, for example, for data engineering, being able to write tests for different pipeline implementation, to pick up duplications, provide recommendations of how to make queries more efficient. For data analysts, you already have engines, text to SQL, and this is huge, of course, accelerator to reporting. And eventually, to me, self-service access to data analytics would be the biggest achievement of generative AI.
Now, one of the barriers that I always see to analytics, you have to bridge the gap between the business and the data. And many times when you think about maybe some business KPIs or some way to measure progress or the success in the business, it's hard to translate that into what that means in the data. So, I know that a lot of organizations actually don't have a data dictionary of terms of saying, we talk about churn. This is what it means. These are the fields or the columns in the data that are used in order to calculate that. So that bridge from the business terms to what that means in the data, I think is a challenge for a lot of organizations. How do you think about that, and how do you making that semantic leap from what the business goal is to the data itself? And how does Gen
So you
AI
just
help with that?
Yeah, so it just described this paradigm where what we see right now in organizations, especially big organization, is lots of loss in translation, so to say. You have business users, and business users have questions in hand, and they speak to the trusted analyst, and then trusted analyst is transporting this question to data engineers. So lots of people are involved in this process of creating analytics and answering questions, and which is essentially already results in analytics which is not sufficient sometimes, or many times actually we see it every day. Have different naming conventions, metric definitions, and lots of inefficiencies overall. So where I see organizations are going to change their behavior is what we call application-free future, right? Application-free future is this ultimate mission of any enterprise to have unified experience for every employee. You have question, you have task, and then you have a launcher, right? It's this blank page, and you start asking them. And what happens? Application workflows and data meet each other and compose this workflow for the specific task in hand. Right, so this is ideal world. For this ideal world, it means that logic or business logic meets data structures in improvised manner, right? Not a pre-modeled manner. And we are so far, like on one hand, we are so far from the situation right now where data is being pre-modeled by technical data people for the business logic, and where we already have lost in translation. So how we bridge the gap? So to me, semantics, what we call semantic AI or semantic fabric, is basically this bridge where it can help us nowadays, right? And I will tell you in a second, like what's my point of view on that, and which should be essential part of this application-free future, right? To basically match make between the logic and the corresponding data. So what semantic fabric is basically encapsulation of business logic with a lineage to data structure. Think about like this micro elements of logic, like for example, a customer semantic entity, which has different attributes coming from the CRM applications, from maybe the customer support or service organization. So basically different pieces which comprise semantic entity, which is called customer on the logic side, on one side. On the other side, you do have a lineage to the data, which actually calculates different attributes such as of customers, for example, a level of customer activity or VIP status, and so on and so forth. For the semantic fabric to happen, of course, you have to have a high degree of automation because you do expect to connect lots of data sources to that. And you cannot possibly with human labor to construct those connections. And that's why you can use generative AI to help you with that.
Understanding how generative AI can help in the organization. And it is a big buzzword today. There's a lot of talk about using it, and a lot of organizations talk about it and are implementing it and are advertising it. But I wonder what your assessment of the state of generative AI in the enterprise organizations is today, because I question the level of maturity in organizations. You can certainly build a generative AI app pretty easily today. You've got the platforms, you've got the tools. You don't even have to write any code. But to scale it to an enterprise level, you need to consider a lot of externalities. There's security, there's explainability, responsible AI, data quality that requires sort of a whole ecosystem in and of itself in order to make it useful in an enterprise scale. First of all, what do you think is overall kind of the maturity level of organizations that you meet today? And how do you assess the maturity of those organizations to implement such scalable solutions?
Yeah, maturity is definitely one of the biggest factors. How do you draw the trajectory to where generative AI, meaningful generative AI can happen in specific organization? Majority of organizations we speak to in financial sector and pharma and retail do have plans to have a generative AI within 12 to 18 months in production, right? They might already have small POCs, maybe internal use cases, and then they have to learn to have a more robust, more impactful use cases in the future. And I would say right now we're in the third wave of generative AI implementation. So first wave, 2022, ChatGPT appeared and all the CEOs were super excited about it. They use it and like, why don't I have it in my organization? And just, pay for it, like take this API, put it on my Snowflake and start pulling data. And that's what majority of organization did, because you have to speed up, right? And of course, they got lots of hallucinations, but also lots of insights of what went wrong, right? And of course, for starters, what went wrong is realize that especially structured data in the data lakes, warehouses, databases should to have semantically meaningful labeling. You have semantic tool, and then you have non-semantically meaningful data. It just simply does not work. And so this is where like data quality picked up, AI ready data trends. This is the origin. So 2023 was all the year of AI ready data use case. A majority of organizations already have either implementation plans, projects in the process, or plans to tackle AI readiness of their data. So second wave was actually to speak about how off-the-shelf software understands organizational language. So let's say you already have labeled data, and now you put, Hugging Face. Let's take another vendor, Hugging Face on top of it, and still you have hallucinations. Why? Because Hugging Face is trained on Wikipedia and social and news and what have you. It's not trained on your insurance lingo, right? And this is where context became popular. So RAG, graph RAG, and other techniques to basically build organizational context and now even reasoning, right? Build it manually to feed into off-the-shelf software to be able to start speaking organizational language. And of course, it's still also a very challenging process because again, you take technical people, data scientists, much more expensive than data engineers, proverbial data engineers, which is data modeling. But the process is not very far away from data modeling. It's basically creating this representative cells of questions, answers to create the context and some symbolic links to. So again, we trust technical people to reflect the business logic of organization. So lots of things can go wrong, right? on this path, right? And also it's very expensive because like the statistics, 80% of tokens of credits, which right now are purchased from online services APIs, they're basically spent on training and customization of the models and not on actual use of the model in inference, like in runtime, right? So very high cost, very skilled personnel, and no guarantees of reliability because when you scale beyond table or data set, it goes wrong, right? Goes wrong in a sense. So this is second way. Third way, as you rightfully mentioned right now, a majority of the companies already understand that you need guide rails, you need governance, you need to bring more departments to the implementation. So it's not only AI group or data science group. Right now, it goes beyond that. So basically, you bring your data stewards, so like your security experts, to monitor your access rights and your bias and your compliance to AI standards. And so basically lots of that. I would say it's also on the usability part, because if you do expect your generative AI analytics chatbots, agentic analytics to basically serve your business users, they have to be business user friendly. At the moment, what we see like sales personnel or service call center personnel have hard time to start prompting the kind of give us a library of what we can ask, right? Give
Mhm.
us the list, like what we can ask, what we can start programming, because they already understand from the consumer experience when they change the question in ChatGPT, they have different answer. So they kind of intimidated what will happen in the enterprise setting, right? So user experience, like having this explainability and feedback loops and basically bring trust to the end users to actually get the results, so they get
Mhm.
the results and actually trusted to take action. So all of that right now is missing in majority of the projects which we see are happening on the market.
And just out of curiosity, since we're in the third wave, what do you anticipate the fourth wave would be?
Yeah, so fourth wave, hopefully, right, is going to be generative AI who has automated guide rails. You know, there are lots of methods which you can monitor and embed tests, automated tests, and monitoring and all of that. But also have this more customer centric contextual experience,
Mhm.
right? So if I'm right now sitting in, support center, let's say, and I don't know why the customer receipt looks like it looks. I want to ask the system. The system should know that I have a specific role and I perform specific set of tasks and I do have access to specific data. And it should even recommend me specific questions. So I should, okay, what can I ask about this receipt? And it navigates me through this exploration workflow.
Mhm.
So all of that is already possible technology wise. So technology already exists. We can speak about like what this technology is, but this experience already exists. It just as you mentioned, different organizations are in different maturity phase of their journey. Some of them are just in the first one, some of them are getting closer to the third one. But this is what it takes to actually have production grade enterprise generative AI.
Interesting. One of the things that I think about that I think is exciting that maybe kind of is already here, but is coming up is the idea of using multiple generative AI agents together. And I think that's one of the latest kind of buzzwords around agentic AI. We have a
Mhm.
bunch of agents talking to each other. Can you talk a little bit about what that is?
Agentic analytics is, or agentic AI is a great term to describe in more sophisticated way that we should should have been explaining the need in workflows, right? So
Mhm.
yeah, I'm speaking about application-free future, but our reality is that we have lots of applications, right, as employees. So think about you are a physician right now, and here comes patient, and they describe the specific problems, and then you start to read the history and so on and so forth, and then you need to pull up maybe the ultrasound or maybe some scans, MRI scans. So all of that is a very specific process, and it requires a skilled professional to basically understand all the context and intersect between them. Now imagine that we want to explain this experience or augment this experience with generative AI, which means we will need a different model for each of that. We'll need one model which can write maybe attached PDFs with summary of visits, previous visits. We will need another PDF who know how to read the electronic record and see patterns, maybe of checkups or blood tests. We'll have third a model which will be able to understand this, findings in MRI scan. So all of those models are called agents. Each of them has specific function and specific acumen, specific training set, but there should be a workflow which combines them. And this workflow also has to share context, which means the context is patient and the context also is physician, and it has to have output which is recommended action. And this is a huge challenge right now because majority of the models do not know how to share context.
Mm.
uh, so this is where agentic analytics, in some ways, like for example, for data management and data analytics, it's manageable. It's already happening. It's here. But for some more sophisticated cases, like this patient, doctor kind of situation, it's still not here.
When I think about agents, I think of them sort of mimicking an organizational structure of different roles in the organization. are we going to end up needing agents as HR when the agents don't get along with one another? Obviously this relates to orchestration and the workflows that you mentioned. But is that currently a challenge that you're seeing around agents not getting along or not having, like you said, a common context to work with? Or
Yes
if
and
they
no.
just hate each other?
Yeah, so those handshakes have to happen, right? Those handshakes between agents have to happen. So let me take you back to your question about semantic layers.
Mhm.
Like semantic layers is actually, it brings a single source of truth for semantic definitions, like for terminology, for metrics between different applications. So what's happening right now in the more traditional data setting, data management setting, that you have to have semantic layers to basically bring the single source of truth between different legacy applications, maybe your on-premise ERP, maybe your transactional systems for financial transactions and so on and so forth. Interestingly enough, we have the same situation for the most advanced software companies which are based on a modern data stack, like this proverbial modern data stack. You have 50 different SaaS tools. Every tool has different naming conventions and different way to calculate metrics. So the problem didn't disappear with the involvement of modern data stack. So semantic layers is a single source of truth which supports you to have alignment on terminology and definitions and have lineage to the correct data source. So for example, for insurance policy, you know that you have address of a insurance beneficial, but also have address of the employer, like company, and you have also address maybe of an accident, right? So it all has context and what it has lineage. For this future of agentic analytics, we have to have this single source of truth one notch up. Why? Because agentic agents or generative AI, they do not speak in SQL, they do not speak in lineage, they cannot like use APIs to understand the definition. They speak a language of context and reasoning. So the semantic layers, they have to have right now implementation which generative AI can digest. This, I didn't mention it in Illumex introduction, but we actually what we think is a good way to take it into generative AI phase is to actually take semantics as a presentation of vector database on graph. So it has like the semantic component and has content component and it has relational model embedded. So you can use nowadays applications like BI which can connect and take it to the data analytics side of usage, but you can also feed it into generative AI. So the same semantic layer or semantic fabric serves you traditional data management and traditional analytics, but it should be shared with generative AI. If you do not share it with generative AI, you have another silo of definitions, right? So this is where semantic AI or semantic layers are relevant nowadays, but they're going to be instrumental for agentic analytics because this is exactly the shared context which you can use as orchestration vehicle to your question. Very, very long answer to your question. Orchestration vehicle to agentic analytics in the future.
So that really answers my next question. When I look at organizations today that are interested in AI and in generative AI in particular, you see a lot of times that the data is so siloed between departments and it doesn't get lined up, that you don't get a holistic view of the organization. You may be able to implement something that is for a department or for a team, but it's hard to scale it across the organization. Sounds like creating a semantic layer is sort of a first step before you can really do a cross-organizational agentic approach. So data management here becomes a big problem in the organization.
I do agree this is related to data management, but let me just frame it in another way. Business logic or business semantics should it's actually used in the business, like in go-to-market functions and in core business and so on and so forth. So in bigger companies, you do have departments which are called governance teams with data stewards, which which have all those Excel, so nice tools to upload those Excels to, right? And maybe never ask ask again how it's defined. Anyways, those people are like living Wikipedia of organizational logic, right? So, and then there are data management teams which have different approach to semantics. They have sometimes aggregated layers in their warehouses, right? Or they might use SQL libraries, which is defined as metric stores in their BI tools. So different representations. And as we already mentioned, there is already lost in translation between consumers, data consumers, and data producers. And now what we have right now in organizations, different documentation about what logic should be, right? So this is where I see the problem, not necessarily in data management, how data is managed towards this logic, but about this disconnect of approaches. So business side or governance teams keep that documentation in one type of tools, and data teams keep the documentation in different types of tools, which are not connected, of course. So to me, it's less of a data management problem, it's communication problem and connection between two of them.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, it will then reflect into data management. Why? Because there are two approaches actually. You have a data fabric approach, like centralized single source of truth, which is managed from single location, and there is data mesh approach, which is a kind of getting lower and lower adoption as we speak. The
Mm-hmm.
data mesh says I might be company with different geographies. In each geography, I might define this metric in different way, and I want to keep it this
Yeah.
way because this is how things work, right?
Yeah,
As
that's
far
part of
as
their business logic.
yeah, exactly. As far it's documented clearly, right? It could actually hold truths as far it's documented,
Mm-hmm.
but it has to be the same environment. So what I'm trying to say is we have to have one singular environment, which is automatically connected to data management practices, pipeline, monitoring tool, quality tools, via metadata integration. And the same basic layer tool has to connect to business applications and business tools and to governance frameworks via APIs. So it has to be integrated. So we cannot keep physical separation between systems because we want logic to be inherently coupled with the data.
I want to switch gears. Let's say you are getting started with a generative AI project in an organization. On one hand, designing and implementing an impactful use case can take time, and the organization may not have the appetite to wait. Of course, you want to do something impactful that will everybody will be happy. But on the other hand, so you may want to start with a quick win, but that may be less impactful and leave the organization maybe less impressed. How do you think about the balance of the two and how to introduce generative AI into an organization, short term versus long term?
Always true for any kind of project, right? To have milestones and expectations of the end users and so on and so forth. So of course, when you say generative AI, we already covered that you have to have AI data.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how long does it take? And then you have to have governed semantics, another big, heavy lifting, unless you use automation. And only then you can create generative AI. Will organization wait for like 12 to 18 months to actually, get the results? I think
Mm-hmm.
it's actually longer than the tenure of most chief data officers and organizations nowadays. So I would say, every initiative to have smaller deliveries on the course of bigger projects, even for to validate that the project is on course, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, for example, you might have, for your marketing department, you might have this ambition that you want to create ad hoc segmentation or analysis with a self-service, in the near future. In the meanwhile, you can already use generative AI for text summarization, for visuals creation and so on and so forth. So as far as you have those policies, outline, and you have guide
Yeah.
rails, so you have to have like this quality monitoring and governance in place. It's important, but you have to have this balance between immediate and impactful. Again, it's three stages. AI-ready data, governance, hopefully augmented through semantics, right? Semantic fabric and so on and so forth, and then only implementation of generative AI, whatever wrapper you choose.
So really, you want to be very careful with the use case that you choose to start with. That's a good balance of the two. So looking forward, we talked a little bit about, what might be phase 4, wave 4 in generative AI. I think that in 2023, the Gartner hype cycle, there's the peak of inflated expectations, and I think that generative AI was up at the top of that up until last year. And then the next phase of that is the trough of disillusionment, where everybody realizes that it was just, a lot of buzzwords and a lot of hype. And I think actually that's the best place to be in, because then you can strip away all of the BS and then really start looking at what real use cases, and they're not overhyped. It's not going to change the world. It's going to maybe help you get one task done better that can help in your workflow or something. Where do you think generative AI in the enterprise organizations is? Are we at the peak of inflated expectations? Or are we more down in the trough of disillusionment and are finally, starting to work our way into real world usable use cases that actually make sense and can help bring value?
As a startup founder, I have to be optimist by nature.
Sure,
So,
sure.
so to me, we already in this phase where realization happens and companies are more mature in understanding what it takes. So it's kind of ramping up into a real productization of the use cases, which will see the light as production grade generative
Yes.
AI.
Yeah.
And I'm super excited about what future holds. And to me, what future holds is, again, how we started this conversation with this multimodality, right? So organizations do not have just one type of the data in the databases. They have documents, they have policies, they have images, pictures,
Right.
audios.
Yeah.
Right now we're using this conversational collaboration tool to record this podcast, so the audio is going to be part of it. So multimodal generative AI, which has agentic analytics as enabler, will be probably the next holy grail for organization to tackle, and they're going to tackle it one function by one, right? So having partial use cases implementation first, and then enriching them with additional modalities and so on and so forth. Let me take this buzzword which we use a lot, semantics, right?
Mhm.
One notch up. And to me, the future word which is going to be very frequently used is ontology. So ontology is basically how we connect semantics with context, with reasoning. And ontology basically represents how, back to doctor-patient situation, how a branch connects to the physician, how it connects to the patients, to the receipt, to the disease, and so on and so forth. This is ontology. And this ontology will be the cornerstone and connector between this multimodal use cases, like
Mhm.
multimodal data on one side. On the other side, there will be this context for agentic analytics with multiple agents implementing those use cases. So semantics is going to evolve into a ontology-based context to me, and one flat, let's say flat generative AI use cases like having analytics are going to be evolving into multimodal generative AI.
And then speaking of evolutions, the other question that I had was around the models themselves. Now with the new O1 models, for example, from OpenAI, it seems that they also change very quickly. So as opposed to the GPT-4, where at a high level, there's way less hallucinations and there's way less need for prompt engineering. How does that affect your forward thinking with the technology itself changing so rapidly as well? Like, can you keep up with it in your planning of where Illumex is going next?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, totally. I personally think that, like with every technology, it's going to be a race to the ROI, right? Price
Mhm,
performance.
mhm.
And we see all this benchmark already show that the majority of performance are getting very close, but the price tags are very different. So companies will definitely look into engagements where they can measure this ROI and not marry to specific vendor, to specific service, right? Because it can become like super expensive. So what in Illumex we enable and plan to continue enabling for this future, because we do create this automated context organizations,
Mm-hmm.
and up to semantics and up to integration with the actual application, runtime and interfaces. We also enable orchestration of the runtime, right? So companies can use the context to connect to different runtime environments, such as on-premise deployed model, which might suddenly consume too much infrastructure. It could be switched to online API service with the same performance for less money. So it will be a future where you will see kind of a TCO-oriented thinking about how generative AI has been productized, and Illumex enables this future by the ability to orchestrate different providers.
If anybody is interested in more information about you or Illumex, where can they find you?
I love social networks, and especially LinkedIn. It just because I know that many people say it's becoming shallow, and all is generative AI.
It's all the generative AI,
Yeah, it's all
articles
generative
and
AI.
and the
I still
engagement.
Yeah, I believe there is still lots of very quality, very high quality content over there. And so please do contact me on LinkedIn. I will be happy to, learn from each other and collaborate. We also have Illumex .ai LinkedIn page and Illumex.ai website. Please do submit your request and we'll be happy to have generative AI discussion.
That sounds amazing. Inna, thank you so much. This was a very fascinating discussion. And thank you for coming on Who's Your Data?
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, thanks for joining us today and listening to this episode. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast. And if you have any questions you'd like addressed, send them to who'syourdatanow@gmail.com. That's who'syourdatanow, all one word, @gmail.com. Thanks, and see you next time on Who's Your Data?